Curtain Pot Tragedy. On June 1st, 2019, 74-year-old Harry Hesketh, a retired computer programmer and passionate caver known to his friends as Esky, descended into Curtain Pot on Fountains Fell in the Yorkshire Dales, England. Caving had been his lifelong passion, a constant pursuit since his teenage years. On this day, he was with two friends, Bernard Walker and another caver, exploring and excavating a new section of the complex cave system. They were about an hour into their trip when the day took a catastrophic turn. While navigating a tight, nearly vertical pitch, Harry was sliding down a rope when he lost his grip and fell. His friends, unable to see him in the darkness below, heard a loud thud, followed by groans of pain. The fall was approximately 20 feet, 6 meters, and the impact had cleanly fractured his left femur. A broken thigh bone is a severe, life-threatening injury, causing excruciating pain, massive internal bleeding, and a rapid descent into shock and hypothermia, especially in the cold, damp environment of a cave. And somewhere in that freezing darkness, despite the pain, you can almost imagine one of the cavers muttering, bro, at least we know gravity's still working. Anyway, his friends immediately called for help, triggering one of the largest and most complex cave rescues in the region's history. Nearly 100 volunteers from at least 7 different rescue organizations, including the Cave Rescue Organization and the Upper Wharfdale Fell Rescue Association, responded to the call. But Curtain Pot is a formidable challenge. Rescuers described it as a 3-dimensional maze of narrow, twisting passages and vertical drops, making any extraction incredibly difficult. A medical officer, Alastair Morris, was among the first to reach Harry deep within the cave. He found him in immense pain, but initially responsive. As the hours ticked by, however, Harry's condition steadily deteriorated. He grew confused and began to drift in and out of consciousness. At one point, his heart stopped. Rescuers performed CPR for a minute in the cramped passage and managed to bring him back. It became clear that waiting was no longer an option. At around 10 p.m., more than 9 hours after the fall, the team made the desperate decision to begin the extraction, knowing it was his only chance of survival. The process was agonizing. One rescuer would later state it was the most difficult extraction he had ever been involved in. The stretcher carrying Harry had to be repeatedly removed and re-rigged to maneuver around the tight, awkward bends. The only way the rescue could have been successful, another volunteer noted, was if Harry had been able to help himself. During the slow, arduous process of lifting him up the first vertical pitch, Harry Hesketh passed away. After a grueling 17-hour ordeal, his body was finally brought to the surface at 5 a.m. the next morning. The coroner later ruled his death an accident, caused by shock and hypothermia from his injuries. Eagle's Nest, Florida's deadliest dive site. On Christmas Day 2013, Darren Spivey, 35, and his 15-year-old son, Dylan Sanchez, descended into the waters of Eagle's Nest Sinkhole in Florida. They were there to test out new dive gear, a Christmas gift. But they were diving into what is known as the Mount Everest of cave diving, a system so dangerous, a sign at the entrance warns, "Stop. Prevent your death. Go no farther." Bro, I would have turned around right there. What do you think the main characters of this segment decided? Exactly. Neither Darren nor his son were certified cave divers. Their dive computers later revealed they reached a depth of 233 feet on compressed air, a depth that induces severe, intoxicating nitrogen narcosis. Investigators believe that while deep inside the labyrinth, confused and impaired, they lost track of time and air. The tragedy likely began when 15-year-old Dylan ran out of air. His father would have attempted a panicked rescue, trying to share his own air in the disorienting darkness. Their new dive lights had also failed, their batteries depleted. In the pitch-black, silt-filled water, a desperate struggle ensued. Dylan's body was later found at 67 feet, his mask torn off and floating around his neck, a clear sign of a futile, panicked ascent. Darren was found deeper, his air regulator out of his mouth. Both of their tanks were empty. This incident was a stark example of inexperience leading to tragedy. But Eagle's Nest is just as deadly for experts. On October 15, 2016, two close friends and highly experienced certified cave divers, Patrick Peacock and Chris Rittenmeyer, geared up for a deep dive into the system. A third friend, Justin Blakely, remained in the sunlit basin as a support diver. Peacock and Rittenmeyer entered the cave around 2 p.m., expecting to be back within the hour. When they failed to surface, Blakely checked for them every 30 minutes until 6 p.m., when he finally called for help. A specialized recovery team was dispatched. After an initial unsuccessful search, they re-entered the cave the next morning. They found the bodies of the two friends lying close together in a deep, dangerous, and complex section of the cave, at a depth of about 260 feet. They were in a treacherous part of the system, where any minor issue, a silt-out reducing visibility to zero, or a problem with their complex rebreather equipment, is magnified into a fatal incident. Their deaths proved that in the depths of Eagle's Nest, there is no margin for error, regardless of skill or experience. Gill Caverns Rockfall. On the morning of May 28, 1988, a massive search was underway in the Gill Caverns in Lancashire, England. 3 cavers, Janet Barnfield, Michael Preece, and David Simpson, had failed to return from a trip the previous day. A 4th member of their party had turned back early, feeling unwell, and raised the alarm when his friends didn't surface. All night, rescue teams had scoured the vast system, one of the longest in Britain, but found no trace. The hope was that the group was simply lost, or stranded with failed lights in one of the cave's many side passages. That hope was shattered when a searcher, navigating the main streamway below a large chamber known as the Assembly Hall, noticed signs of a recent, massive collapse. A huge section of the ceiling, a boulder choke, had given way. At first, the rescuer thought he saw another team member squeezing through the pile of debris. On closer inspection, he realized he was looking at the body of one of the missing cavers, pinned high against the cave wall by a rock the size of a small van. The search had ended. A grim recovery was just beginning. The scene that greeted the recovery teams was one of utter devastation. The passage was choked with tons of freshly fallen rock, and the stream roared beneath the unstable pile. The first 2 victims, Janet and Michael, were recovered from the debris. But the third, David Simpson, was still trapped in the heart of the collapse. He was horrifically compressed by the main boulder, his body crushed against the wall. One rescuer who was there described the scene as something he was unlikely to ever forget, noting the victim's facial features were unrecognizable. Bro, at that point, even the boulder probably went, my bad? The operation to free him was one of the most difficult and dangerous in the history of UK cave rescue. Before they could even begin, the entire collapse had to be stabilized by painstakingly wedging smaller rocks under the larger, teetering boulders. Then, specialized equipment, heavy drills, and stone-splitting tools called plug-in feathers had to be hauled deep into the cave. For hours, the sound of hammers and drills echoed through the passage as the team worked to break apart the rock that held David's body. Finally, After a monumental effort, they were able to free him. The bodies were then placed onto stretchers for the long, arduous carry-out of the cave, a journey that took many more hours of pulling, lifting, and maneuvering through the tight, unforgiving passages of the Gill system.